I on? Great. Awesome, everyone. Nice to see you from this area of the stage as well. Nice to be together this morning and awesome to worship together. I think times of worship is so, I cherish it so much. And I'm just celebrating just everyone in our congregation just engaging in worship as well. So that's your time with God, that you're connecting with Him. So I want to encourage you really to never lose those moments because it's so precious. And sometimes God just wants to come and reveal something to you and just also and always be open to it. But it's great to be here together this morning, and what a privilege it is to be able to spend time in God's Word. Now, we're in our series called Kingdom Living. It's our year-long series where we are speaking through the Sermon on the Mount. We're taking a break here and there, but for the most part and for the bigger part of the year, we are speaking on the Sermon on the Mount and what Jesus said, and looking at Matthew chapter 5 to chapter 7. And as part of our tradition, let's call it a tradition, we want one of our community group leaders to come and read the verse that we're going to be speaking about this morning. So I'm going to invite my wife and my daughter. She's now 4 months old, so she can read already. So I'm kidding. I'm gonna let my wife do the reading just for this. Oh, you're gonna read with the mic. Okay, multitasking. Wives, take note. So my wife is gonna do the reading, and what a privilege to have them there. See, my daughter's eyes are open as well. So sorry.
Hello, everyone. I'm reading Matthew chapter 7, verse 1 to 6. Do not judge others, and you will not be judged, for you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. And why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? How can you think of saying to your friend, "Let me help you get rid of that speck in your own eye," when you can't see past the log in your eye? Hypocrite, first get rid of the log in your own eye. Then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. Don't waste what is holy on people who are unholy. Don't throw your pearls to pigs. They will trample the pearls, then turn and attack you.
Dankie, liefie. En my dogtertjie, I'll use the opportunity always. So we let our community group leaders come and read because we want to get you into a community group as well. So if you're not in a community group, we really want to encourage you. There on the community group wall, we have community groups for all, let's call them seasons of life. So make sure that if you're not connected, that's how we do church here as well. We want to get you involved into a community group. How you can get involved is there on your left-hand side. You'll see there's a small wooden table with a sign-up sheet. So just go and write your name there, and we'll contact you and make sure that you get connected to a group. Wonderful. So, what a topic to be teaching on this morning. And Abel sends his regards. He, if you don't know it yet, him and his wife are blessed with a fourth child, which actually he got born, I think, was it Friday evening or Thursday evening? I can't remember. But little Rua got born this week, and it's their fourth boy in the house. So let's give them just a hand in their absence as well. Abel said, "Does he need to be here this morning?" I'm like, "No, I think we've got everything under control." They are also just they're healthy and everything, and Karin and the baby is doing well. So thank you for all your prayers and praying with them as well. Now, and that's also strategically, I think, why Abel planned this like this, because allowing me to teach on a topic like this, judging others. Wonderful. So now, before Jesus starts to teach in Matthew chapter 5, because we're speaking on the Sermon on the Mount, he, in Matthew chapter 4, verse 17, he says these amazing words. He says, "The kingdom of heaven is at hand." And what he means by that is that the kingdom that he himself came to introduce to us, that it is now accessible for you and for me. It's not a one-day thing when we get to heaven. It's a here and now thing. And Jesus came to announce that. And then, when he's finished with that, he starts teaching in Matthew chapter 5 on all of these topics, all of these everyday relational things that you and I encounter. Things like anger, things like lust, things like generosity, like anxiety. The list goes on. You can go and watch our YouTube channel if you maybe missed some of those messages, but we literally taught on every piece of scripture thus far. And now we're here in Matthew chapter 7. Now, Jesus here, I think he's exploring a bit more of what a community of disciples actually look like. I think the first 2 chapters, even though it is applicable to everyone, I think it speaks a bit more directly to you. Things like anger, things like lust, generosity, all those things. It's a very personal thing, am I right? Very, very personal. But he comes and he says in chapter 7, he comes and and you're going to see throughout the rest of Matthew chapter 7, he's looking at what does a community of disciples do? How does it look like? How do they function? Because Jesus is trying to get this thing across that we as believers, fellow believers in Christ, we can't journey alone. We can't do the Christian journey alone. We are not called to do it alone. We are called to do it within community with other people. And Bill Johnson actually said it so nice one time. He said, if you're into God, if you love God, then you need to be into people as well. Because God chooses to journey with people. He chooses to work through people. That's how he did it from the beginning. He will never stop doing it. He chooses to partner with us in this journey. And that's awesome to hear because we are necessary to each other. That's what Jesus is trying to show us as well. You and I, in this journey, we are necessary towards each other. But Jesus realizes that when people are involved in the equation, then sometimes bad things might happen. People will have broken relationships and all of those things. Have you maybe encountered, working with people on a daily basis, that sometimes there are struggles? Maybe? Just in my house? Okay. But where there are other people involved, there are always going to be some form of a disruption, some form of a relationship barrier that needs to be crossed. And what a way to start in chapter 7 than with judgment. One of the big things that arises when you and I engage with each other and when we as a community engage together. Now, there's this research group in the US. They call themselves the Barna Research Group. So what they do is they go and research what is the impact of the Christian faith in the society of today. And I think this specific research that they did 15 years ago, they specifically asked the question, what do you as a non-believer, because that's what they did, they went and asked non-believers, what are the top 2 characteristics that you think describe Christians the best? Now, I don't know how to tell you this, but the results weren't as positive. We can go to the next one. So that's the results that came back. When non-Christians were asked, how would you describe a Christian best? Judgmental and hypocrite. And I gotta ask, guys, what are you doing there on the outside world? No, I'm just kidding. Just need to see serious faces. But that's how people feel about, the Christian journey. And that's how people sometimes feel about people who associate themselves with Jesus. Now, most of us probably feel that, okay, that's not necessarily me. I mean, come on. Maybe you look around the room and you think, oh, maybe that guy, but it's definitely not me. And that's maybe the problem. We are not quick to see our own judgments, but I need to give you the harsh news today that in reality, to this very day, you and I, we still do judge. Even if you don't know it, you still do. How do I know that? So I have a few examples here this morning. So I recently on YouTube, who is guilty of watching YouTube shorts in their spare time? Come on, it's not just, no, that's it. There we go. Confession time. So I'm guilty of sometimes watching that, and I've seen these videos of these street preachers preaching. They're preaching more a bit about hell than they're preaching about heaven, condemning people right and left. They don't even know the people they're speaking with always. Sometimes I think it's a person that's maybe saved. They're a child of God. But he's telling them, you're going to hell. Hell awaits you. Need to repent. And I'm like, what I'm doing then in that moment is I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, ish, my friend, hey, that's not the right way to evangelize, I believe. I think there are better ways. But what am I doing then? I'm judging the person. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm judging them 9 ways to Sunday. But that's the first example. The second example, that maybe this is a bit more relatable. When you drive in your car, do you make judgments on other people based on their driving skills? Can I maybe ask this morning? I know we all do it, and I also do it, but when you drive, and you're driving and someone maybe drives in front of you or they do something wrong, what does this mean? Maybe it's Christian language for a sign that you're not allowed to use, actually. But we all do that. We judge people based on how they drive. And the next one. Shame, man. How often have we judged this guy? And thing is, I don't know a lot about everything. My wife will disagree with you. I think she thinks I know everything, but I really don't know everything. But I know a thing or two about rugby, I think. And come on, let's just be honest with each other this morning. This is not boots and all. We're not going to have a chat about it. But this guy's not a bad rugby player. He's very good. Did you see the game yesterday? He really played good. The tries that we scored, amazing passing work. He's got vision. He just struggles a bit with his kicking. But man, do we judge him on that? That's the only, he can do 70 million things right. And I know you say, yeah, but that cost us the match, eh? But if you really go look at it critically, last weekend's game, we're not going to speak about it the whole Sunday, I promise. But if you go look at it critically, it's just me being passionate about rugby. We made a lot of other mistakes as well. So we can't just blame that. But we love to judge Mani. And I was sitting there, I did it as well. I didn't necessarily watch the game on Saturday evening because we have a baby in the house and we need to sleep is very nice actually. If you don't have kids yet, or if you maybe don't remember it, sleep really, wow, it really is like gold, it's treasure. You need to treasure it while you still have it. So I didn't necessarily watch the game. But when I watched it on the Sunday, I was sitting there on the couch judging this top fit pro rugby player, me sitting there with a Coke in one hand, the chips, Doritos in the other hand, with a chocolate maybe here on the side here, with my feet up thinking, what? How can you miss that kick? It's so easy. It's not that easy. So we judge people very easily sometimes. But you know what are one of the groups of people we often, still to this very day, we judge the most? It's each other. Our fellow brothers and sisters in Christ. We are very quick to judge. And if it's just the case that you're not allowed to be in another church, because then I'm going to judge you as well, because that's how we feel sometimes. No, my church is the only church that's right. And that's how we sometimes think. We judge people who are in other churches who maybe just disagree on one theological aspect, not about Jesus, not about anything, but maybe just one thing. Maybe just on when do we sing in church? Do we sing before the sermon or after the sermon? And that we make a judgment based on that. And it's crazy how we judge each other. Now, on the other side, I want to ask you as well, when Jesus is saying that you should not judge, do you think he's saying that I should now just throw away my moral compass, agree with everything, and just okay everything because, I'm not allowed to, zip it. I'm not allowed to say anything. Do you think that's what he's saying? No, that's not what he's saying. If someone's teaching you that, no, not good. That is not what he is teaching us. Now, if we look at the word judge, the original Greek word is the word krino. Say that out loud with me. Krino. Krino. Now, that specifically means to make a decision, to decide. Like the English word, it has a lot of different meanings. It means to make a decision, but also to judge, to make a judgment, like a judge in a competition would necessarily do. Those guys on Britain's Got Talent and all those, they are judges. They also make a judgment on whether someone is good enough or not. And it's funny how we say we shouldn't judge people, but we watch reality shows of people judging each other the whole time, and then we kind of get a kick out of it. But when we hear the word judgment or the word judge, we sometimes have a very negative view on it, because we think that this word has some type of superiority complex. You think it's me sitting on my high chair thinking and looking at you and thinking, wow, how it must hurt to be there in that season of your life. We make judgment calls, but what we just heard is Jesus is not saying that we need to just throw away everything that we believe in. We can't give an opinion. I'm going to help you a bit now towards that, because for those of you who feels like, I need to help people, I want to have an opinion. Facebook warriors, someone here in church. Okay, don't raise your hands. But maybe you feel like, yes, I need to, I want to do this. It's who I am. I love helping people on the right track. we're here for you as well today. But we make judgment calls on a daily basis. Jesus is not calling us to just abandon all form of judgment. Part of your journey as a disciple is your ability to grow in your judgment, actually, in your discernment, looking at situations and deciding whether this is good or whether this is bad. That's part of the call. Jesus wouldn't speak on all of these topics if he knew we weren't going to be faced with them one day. He knew we were going to be faced with anger, so we're going to have to decide, are we angry in this situation? My wife's going to have to decide, I did not wash the dishes. Is she going to be angry now? Is she going to act in a certain way? Is she going to make a judgment? We face these things every day, and I promise I will go and wash it when we're done now at church, Liffy. So, Jesus is not speaking about, I think, judgment as a whole, but he's speaking on a specific kind of judgment. The judgment Jesus is referring to is the way we judge. Very different. He refers specifically to the way we judge. Now, how do we often judge people? When we see something we don't agree with, when someone is not in line with what we believe in, we then look at what they're doing, we decide how we feel, we make a judgment, and that's sometimes where it needs to stop. Okay, cool, fine. But what we then do is we condemn, we even verbalize it, and on some level we think God agrees with us when we do it like that. We think God is sitting there next to us when we're writing that Facebook comment, judging this person. We think God is sitting there next to us saying, yes, well done, love it. This is what I've called you to do, yes, well done. No. And it's not the way. We look at other people sometimes and think, how can someone fall this far? How can they be this wrong? How? You see, we also sometimes assume this is someone's character, just based on one decision that has been made, just based on one thing that has been done wrong. We automatically go to a person's character and think, oh, this is probably who you are. No. I'm telling you, honestly, if people had to encounter me in my worst moments, and that would have been my character, and people would have made a call on that, I wouldn't have been standing here today. I would not have been standing here today. Now, hear me again on the other side, because I know people are going to feel like, okay, yes, so I'm not allowed to say anything ever again. That's a bit harsh. That's not because we said that's not what Jesus is saying. But we're specifically referring to the way we judge people. We're specifically referring to the way we judge people. You see, Jesus is still calling you and me to look at our daily decisions and to make a call, how is this going to work? Have the ability to discern whether something is good or bad. He says in John 7 verse 24, he says, look beneath the surface so you can judge correctly. That's what Jesus is calling you and me to. Look beneath the surface. But that is a journey on its own. Now, because a lot of people now read this verse and think, yes, that song, I am free to run. You think that I am free to judge. Yes, let's go. You can't. That's not what we're saying. Okay. If that's you, the next part is specifically for you. We're not done with this passage yet. So, Jesus goes further and he says the following. Why worry about a speck in your friend's eye when you have a log in your own? How can you think of saying to your friend, let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye when you can't see past the log in your own eye? Hypocrite. First get rid of the log in your own eye. Then you will see well enough to deal with the speck in your friend's eye. Now, I think Jesus is going for a bit of a comedic angle also here. Now, if you visually show how does it look, if you have a speck in your eye and I have a log in my eye, it's literally more or less something like this. I literally won't be able to see, but like, hey, Yandru, I see something's wrong there with your, I can't, Yandru, where are you? That's literally what Jesus is trying to point us towards. He says, first remove the log from your own eye before you try to correct someone else's behavior. Now, where we are at fault most often as Christians is we accuse others, but we excuse ourselves. And that's something we're very good at. We aren't so harsh with ourselves when it comes to, our standards. And we're quick to say, don't judge me. But we're quick to accuse others. And that's exactly what Jesus is trying to show us here and warn us, that even though your judgment on that specific person because someone is doing maybe something wrong. They may be not in the right at the moment. Jesus he's not denying the fact that there's a speck in their eye. He's not doing that. But what he's saying is if that's all you're focusing on, just look. Look and see if it's just the same with your life as well. And you may also be in the wrong at a season in your life and you don't even know it. If you think at Sundays in church, how often do we judge people just based on how they look and when they walk through the door? I grew up very traditional in church, and we had to dress in a specific type of way. This, how I'm dressed now, would not have been appropriate. If I walked into church like this, people would have been like, oh, hier agter sit hoor. Mother's room is, wait, let's just... At those times, there weren't online services yet, so they would have probably encouraged me to go and watch the online service at home. But it's true. How often do we judge someone just based on how they look? When they come in here and think, I don't know. I think we're getting something of it right here, but people will still sometimes walk in here and still feel judged. And we'll still be like, oof. Yeah. Someone made the comment the other day, and it's very controversial. And I'm still on the what do you call, the seesaw, a bit about that, leaning a bit more towards the other side. But one pastor actually said, what would it look like if the church actually smelled a bit more like alcohol and cigarettes, a bit more? You think that's the place it should be? Because if it did look like that, how would you feel about that? And that's a question we need to ask ourselves. But we sometimes look at people coming into church and think, how can that person be here this morning? There's this story about a man coming to the pastor. He says, Pastor, yes, can you just look at the people around you? Look at that man who came in this morning. You know what he did? He robbed his family of millions, his own family. And he's here this morning. He's allowed to sit here this morning. That lady over there, this is her fifth marriage this year. She's been married to 5 men. How can she just come and sit here in the front row as if nothing's happened? How? And the pastor, he looks at him. He gives him a glass of water. He says, I'm going to give you an assignment. As you're here at church now, well done. Take this glass of water. It's full of water, so make sure you don't spill. Walk through every row. Walk past every person. Walk past the building. And then come back to me. And I'm going to check if he didn't spill. And he does that, comes back to the pastor, and he says, okay, I finished this assignment. What's your point? And the pastor said, while you were walking and focusing on the water that shouldn't spill, did you see anyone else while you were doing it? Did your eyes catch something else? He said, no, I was only focusing on what you gave me to focus on. You see where I'm heading with this? The pastor then tells him, I think for the next season of your life, let's just focus on God for a bit and not on other people. Because I think that's first of all the main thing we need to do. And you'll see now why I'm saying this. Because judging people just because they're sitting here this morning, because of the circumstances of their life, it's, someone used the argument, it's just like walking into the gym and going to the manager and saying, did you see all of the overweight people in this gym this morning? How can they be here this morning? And that's the same argument. That's the same argument. We need to have grace with people who are not there where we are. Yeah, well done. You're maybe a fitness model at the moment. Well, yes, lekker. Me, myself, I'm still busy with my recovery season. And it's exactly the same when it comes to church. We sometimes need to know that people aren't in the same season we are. You see, obviously I'm not saying again, I'm not saying you can excuse everything. Because if you come to church and think you're going to drive your own agenda here, then you're also in the wrong. Then we're also going to help you. But you can't excuse everything as well. But Jesus says that if all you're looking is for the fault of other people, then you might have a little case of the hypocrite. Then self-diagnosis. You might have a little case of the hypocrite. Because the place where you issue your harshest judgment, listen to this, the place where you issue your harshest judgment often reveals your biggest weakness. What do I mean by that? I always wondered, why is it so easy for me to judge the Springbok rugby players? Why is it so easy for me? Why do I hurt so often when they don't play the way they're supposed to play? Why do I sometimes judge a guy like Mani Libo kicking it miss? Why do I judge someone when they knock the ball? It's because, and this is a piece of honesty now, and it's all seriousness as well. It's because in my own heart, I played rugby in high school, and I know a lot of the men here maybe did. Maybe you played for your school's first team, and you had dreams maybe to, because when you play for your school's first team, come on, let's be honest, there is like a bit of hope that, okay, maybe I'm called for this. Maybe I'm called. And maybe it's like that with other sports as well. You think that, okay, I've made it. Watch me. And I had to realize, and I had to make the hard decision. Me, myself, I had to make the decision between Springbok rugby player or pastor. That was not a joke. But that's why sometimes maybe it's easy to judge, because you know, if you could have had it, maybe you would have wanted to have it. You would have wanted to have that opportunity. I've heard a story about a guy who, him and his friend are in the community group together, and he comes to the leader and he says he can't anymore. His friend, he knows he's watching things on his phone, and he's married. He's not supposed to do that. He's not supposed to watch those videos. I'm not going to say and expand too much on what those videos were, but I think you can color it in. But he says, I can't. I'm struggling with the fact that he's sinning like this. Meanwhile, this man was currently having an affair with a married woman. You see how our minds can become, and our vision can become distorted when we only look at other people's mistakes and other people's decisions. That's why Jesus is saying, first take the log out of your own eye, then you will be able to see more clearly. And he says in verse 6 the following: don't waste what is holy on people who are unholy. Don't throw your pearls to pigs. They will trample on the pearls and turn and attack you. Now you might be wondering, what is Jesus meaning here? He says we're not supposed to judge. Why is he calling people pigs? That's not what he's saying. But what this means, what this verse actually shows us, is Jesus is trying to tell us that in your life, in your everyday life, at work, at a family reunion, at a high school reunion, where some of you maybe are at the moment, you're going to encounter people that don't feel the way you feel, don't believe the way you believe, and you're not going to be able to say, you know what, thus says the word of the Lord. No. They're going to be looking at you like, what word? Who? They haven't served Jesus. So Jesus is trying to tell us that we can't hold non-Christians to Christian standards. We never hold non-Christians to Christian standards, and I'm going to explain to you why I say that. You see, I believe with all my heart that the reason why so many outsiders feel judged even before they come into church is, you see, they feel that they need to first perfect themselves. They first need to do some self-atonement and become better before they come into church, because they feel judged. We had that conversation now. And like I said, I think we're getting some of it right. But I'll tell you that someone will maybe walk in here this morning and still feel judged. Now, is it just our issue? Probably not. If you think of it clinically. No, probably not my problem what other people feel. I can't be held responsible for what other people feel. People, if that's our thinking of it, then we're missing what Jesus said when he said we need to love our neighbors. We need to journey with each other. That it looks different. Now, can I ask you the following? Is it my job to discipline a child in my home that's not actually living in my home? Is it my job? Some of you might feel like, oh, well, if I'm a teacher, I can discipline children. But you'll know that as a teacher, you only have a certain level of influence in a child's life. Am I right? Only a certain level of influence. Now, let me ask another question. If my daughter invites a friend over one day, a girlfriend, not a boyfriend. She's only going to be start dating at 30. So yeah, we made that decision. She told me as well. But maybe they're 7 years or 8 years old, and the little girl comes to play, and her friend maybe says a word, a swear word, that even I feel like, ooh. What do I do then? Am I allowed to correct that little girl in the moment? Probably some people will feel like, yeah, I mean, parents are not doing their job. I'm just picturing this old woman like, yeah, your parents are not doing their job, so I'm going to discipline you at the moment. No, we sometimes feel like that, right? But what if her parents are okay with her speaking like that? Okay, then my daughter is obviously going to choose better friends eventually. But what if that child does not even have parents? You see where I'm going with this? Where do you draw the line then? The level of judgment we can have over people's lives outside of our own family. What I'm also trying to say with this is we can't expect an orphan to understand immediately what it means to be a son or a daughter. Someone who's never encountered a father's love to understand how it actually is. We can't hold them to the same standards. It's different seasons. And you'll see now why I say what I'm saying actually. Because we do this with people sometimes, am I right? But Paul says in 1 Corinthians 5 verse 12, he says, it isn't my responsibility to judge outsiders. But here's the thing. I think here's the good news for some people. But it certainly is your responsibility to judge those inside of the church who are sinning. Because when you're a part of the family, when you've given your life to Jesus, that's why Jesus is introducing how it looks to be a community of believers. He says then we need to do life together. Then we need to be able to speak into each other's lives. We need to be open for the fact that people will sometimes want, out of love, to help us on the right path. That's what we need to be open to. If you're a disciple of Jesus, you need to be teachable. That's one of, I think, the best characteristics that you need to have. You need to be teachable. You can't say, no, don't judge me. Listen to what Paul is saying. St. Paul, the one who imitated Christ, I think the best by far. He says, it is your responsibility to judge those outside of the church who are sinning. Okay, Albert, but who are the people then inside of the church? Because I'm looking for people to judge now. Now you're saying I'm allowed to do it. Who are the people inside of the church so that I can go and judge them and help them on the right path? I want us to acknowledge just quickly, just pause there and acknowledge that I think the bulk of what Jesus is teaching on is not geared towards the people we can judge. Who are the people? When can I judge them? What Jesus is saying here is he's strategically saying that watch out before you make that judgment because there might be a log in your own eye that you are not currently seeing. We need to realize, people, that our judgments, whether it's fair judgment or unfair judgment, that's never going to change a person's life. I'll give you just some news this morning. It's never going to change a person's life. It's never going to bring someone to salvation. It might have a bit of an impact, but our influence never can bring a person to accept Jesus into their lives. The only way for a person to accept Jesus into their life, to change their life forever, is by who? By the name Jesus himself. He's the only one who can fully change someone's life. When someone opens their heart to his Holy Spirit to come and impact their lives. That's why Revelation chapter 3 verse 20 says, look, I'm standing at the door. I'm knocking. That's what Jesus is doing. He's waiting for the person to open the door. That's the only way someone's life will change. Yes, he can work through you, 100%. 100% he can work through you. But it's not you who got it right. It's Jesus who got it right. Now, that's for people sometimes who are outside of the church. We need to know that we need to have grace for them. We can't just think that they're going to be able to understand precisely where we are in our season and in our journey with Jesus. But when our lives are changed, when people in our environments, when they are here and they're part of our family and they believe in Jesus and they're part of our church and they journey with us, maybe people in our community group, that's a great example because it's people you see on a weekly basis. Those people, what do we do when they fall into sin? What do we do when they become, astray, when they get astray from the path that they're supposed to be on? Paul explains it beautifully in Galatians 6. And can I just on a side note say that if you're ever struggling with understanding grace and the law and the role these two play in the New Testament, Go and read Galatians. I think it's one of the best books that Paul is teaching on specifically grace and how we are now living under grace. He says the following: Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by some sin, you who are godly should, listen to this, gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path. And be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself. You see what he's also, he's leaning on what Jesus was also trying to show us here in the Sermon on the Mount. He says, share your burdens, and in this way obey the law of Christ. Share, we need to share each other's burdens. That's what a community of disciples looks like. That's what, when Jesus is saying the kingdom of heaven is at hand, this is part of doing the kingdom of heaven. We do life together. You see, there's this amazing saying about when it comes to grace and truth, because the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. And when we look at truth and grace, we need to understand that truth without grace is mean. It is. But grace without truth is meaningless. So these two things, they need to be working together. You can't just approach people with just grace. Because Paul is saying that we should not just sin because of grace. But we can't also just approach people with truth, even if it is people who understand truth and grace. We can't just think, okay, so it's just the people outside of the church, that's the people we can, just approach with a bit more grace than truth. But the people in church, we're going to have truth with you. That's not how we are. That's not what Jesus is calling us to. He's calling us to have grace and truth. And this is maybe just Albert's interpretation. It's not necessarily true. But I believe there's a reason why Paul's writing grace first and truth second came through Jesus. I believe there's a reason for that. Now, we're going to, in a few moments, take communion now. I'm going to ask you a question quickly. I want you to imagine yourself this morning. Imagine you coming into church and you just wearing a white board that people can write on. But someone had already written on that board. And what's written on that board is your worst sin that you've ever committed, your deepest failure, your worst fear, and you walk through these church doors with that for everyone to see. How does that make you feel? Makes you feel a bit scared, am I right? I know, I'm like, sure, I hope that will never happen. But how would we look then look at each other? How would we judge each other then? Would we still have the same amount of grace and truth with each other? Can I take you to a verse where someone like this actually had been living that nightmare? And the worship team can join me as we get ready to finish off. I'll read from John chapter 8. A woman caught in adultery. Jesus returned to the Mount of Olives, but early the next morning he was back again at the temple. A crowd soon gathered, and he sat down and taught them. As he was speaking, the teachers of the religious law and Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. Now, your Bible doesn't necessarily say this, but she was caught in the act. What does that mean? While it was busy happening, she was caught. So they probably brought her there, just her covered in a sheet maybe. That was maybe all. And threw her down there on the ground. They put her in front of the crowd. Teacher, they said to Jesus, this woman is caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? They were trying to trap him into saying something that they could use against him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. And they kept demanding an answer. So he stood up and said, all right. He's saying, all right. It's not a thing that you say when you stand up. All right. He was saying, all right, stone her. But let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. Then he stooped down and he wrote again. When the accusers heard this, They slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the women. Then Jesus stood up and said to the woman, "Where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you?" And she says, "No, Lord." And Jesus said, "Neither do I. Go and sin no more." See, this is something beautiful of the gospel that we need to understand when it comes to judgment. When it comes to judging people. We need to understand that Jesus portrays grace. And He has grace with me. He has grace with me. And I've made that decision long ago. Therefore, I will have grace with others. If I help someone, if I see someone making a wrong decision, I'm going to make that judgment call. I'm going to make that judgment call. But if I help them, how do I help them? Humbly and gently. Because I know that I'm not immune to whatever this person's going through. I have a friend in ministry. He said he was visiting a pastor one day in his office. And he saw the pastor had this photo of this very well-known church leader on his desk. And he himself was a bit confused at the moment. He looked at the photo and he says, "You know who this guy is?" He says, "Yeah, why?" He says, "No, I'm confused. I mean, this pastor, he cheated on his wife numerous times. And he's denying it in front of the church, and everything came out eventually." And you hear stories like that today, am I right? And why do you have a picture of this guy on your desk? He says, "It's to remind myself that if it can happen to him, it can happen to me as well." See, people, that's why we need each other. That's why we need to journey together. That's why we need to be able to help one another with the amount of grace and truth that is necessary. That's why we need to journey together. That's why Jesus has called us to do life together, to not walk alone. And when you're coming to the table this morning, drinking and eating the body of Jesus, His body that was broken for our sin, you're publicly also announcing that, yes, I might sometimes make wrong judgment calls. I also have a log in my eye, because that's part of my confession as well this morning. There's still areas in my life that are not sorted out. But oh man, if it wasn't for Jesus, where would I have been? And knowing that of your own life, maybe you're not necessarily in that place where you're struggling anymore. And praise God for that. We give Him the glory for the fact that you are now maybe, let's call it, mature in your faith. But it's your job to help others who are not there. It's your job to help them with the amount of love Jesus had for people like that. People who Jesus journeyed with. Jesus spoke differently to people who were in His circle than He did with people who were outside. He treated them differently. Not because they deserved different treatment, no, but because these disciples who journeyed with Him every day, they understood a bit more now. But not everyone is there. If that's you this morning, you need this. You need the sufficient grace to say that, Lord, I know I'm not always getting it right. Help me to have a heart for people. Help me to bring people back to where they need to be, the way you intended it to be. And if you are feeling judged this morning, if you are one of those people who feel that I'm always just being judged wherever I go, I feel I can't anymore. My friend, Jesus' grace is sufficient for you this morning. You need to know that this morning. It's so sufficient. Nothing will ever compare to what He did for you. No amount of sin can ever ruin God's plan for your life. We are not that powerful. He can always bring you back to where you need to be. He'll come and fetch you. As Jesus fetched Peter, where He found him, Jesus will come and He will get you again. That's His love. can I invite you to take communion, to come to the front. There's tables on my right and left-hand side, also there at the back. I want to encourage you to take communion, to pray to God to help you to have a heart for people. And if you feel judged this morning, just allow yourself to be stirred by the love and grace of Jesus. And we're then going to sing one last song, and then we're going to pray together. So you're welcome to come forward and to come and take some communion.